Battlefield 2042 has a ton of settings that can be quite overwhelming when you scroll through them for the first time or even after the 100th time. But no matter if you just started playing or if you've already been on the battlefield for quite some time, there are always a few settings that are worth checking and that might make your life easier if you set them right. So here's a full overview of how my settings are and what you need to know about the settings in 2042, and also a few points that you should definitely check in your settings. And we're gonna start with the general tab, and over here you can enable crossplay, and I would recommend to keep this turned on because the player count is already pretty low for the game, so you might have a hard time finding a match with crossplay turned off. Then everything else is turned on as well for me, and persistent servers are turned off also by default, but if you want to host a persistent portal server you need to turn this on, otherwise you won't have the option when hosting it. Then we have the network tab, and here I didn't change anything, but if you want to check your network connection or the performance of the game in general, you can turn this on and also turn on the different parameters. Then under display, we're gonna get to the PC settings as well in a minute. And here I have a borderless setting for the full screen mode, simply because I wanna be able to switch between OBS and the game. So I won't have to tab out all the time, but that's just a streamer and YouTuber thing, I guess. So it's not because the game is running better. I would still recommend full screen mode if you can. Then the field of view is 90 for me. The default FOV is at 55, which I think is really, really low. And I would recommend to set it up a little bit at least. And this is totally personal preference, but keep in mind that different values have their pros and cons. So if you have a low FOV, it means that targets appear closer and bigger, but you will see less of your surroundings, so you will have to turn a lot more left and right to see what's going on around you. And with a higher FOV, targets will appear further away and smaller, but you will see more of your surroundings and you will have to turn a lot less to see what's going on around you. But you will also have this kind of fisheye effect at some point. So I feel like 90 is actually a really good FOV. Then vehicle third person is at 70 for me, but again, totally personal preference, and also same advantages and disadvantages as for the normal FOV. And then there is ADS field of view, and I think this is something where you should at least know how it works. So ADS field of view defines which field of view the game is using when you aim down sights, and by default this is turned on, which means you will have the same FOV when aiming down sights that you have when not aiming down sights, and the screen is only zoomed in by the magnification of your weapon's optic. So for example 1.25 in this case here. With the option turned off, on the other hand, the game will use the default FOV instead, which is 55, plus the zoom you have on your weapons. So you will end up with a much higher zoom than you would actually have. And it might be tempting to take advantage of this, but I would still recommend to keep this turned on, because this will give you a much more consistent FOV no matter if aimed down sights or not, and the additional zoom that you would have when turning this option off can totally mess up your muscle memory and even cause motion sickness if you're sensitive to it. Then there is motion blur, chromatic aberration and vignette, and I would recommend to turn motion blur down all the way to 0 and turn off chromatic aberration and vignette, so you have a much clearer picture and won't have this weird motion blur effect when turning. And then we are at the PC graphic settings, and yes, this is a bit of personal preference as well, or a lot of personal preference, and I always focus on the game still looking half decent but still having a good frame rate. So the texture quality is at high for me, texture filtering as well, lighting, shadow and effects are all set to low. Then post-processing is at medium because it just looks terrible when it's set to low. Then mesh is at high, terrain quality the same, also at medium, simply because it looks terrible when set to low. Undergrowth is on low, anti-aliasing and ambient occlusion as well, and the high fidelity objects amount is on high. Then DLSS is unbalanced for me, ray tracing turned off of course, then NVIDIA Reflex to enabled, latency flash indicator off, and future frame rendering and vertical sync off as well because of the reaction time. Then we are at HUD General, and here I have everything turned on, the soldier compass as well always turned on, so this is all how it is set by default. Then the camera shake amount I've set down to 20 completely, because this defines how much your screen will shake from nearby explosions and also from environmental effects like the start of the rocket on orbital, for example. And this can be really distracting and can also affect your aiming stability during gunfights, so it's nothing you really want to have during a game, and so I would recommend to turn this down to 20. Then for the colorblind settings, I've set mine to try the Nopia simply because I like the color scheme, but it's not because I'm actually colorblind. But if you watch my gameplay and you're wondering what this color scheme is, that is simply Tritanopia. But you can also set your own colors here at custom if you have some wild color scheme that you prefer. Kill log is completely disabled for me because I don't need it and I'm not interested in seeing it. And what I would recommend to turn on though are the damage numbers. These are turned off by default, but you can set them to score log or screen sender. This will show you how much damage you actually deal to an enemy or a vehicle with your bullets or with your projectiles. And when score log is selected, the numbers appear in the same spot as your XP events and kills, so below the crosshair, and with screen sender they're shown around your crosshair. And this is also what I would recommend to set this option to, because the crosshair is always in your line of sight. The size can be set to small, medium or large, and you can also move the number around here with the horizontal and vertical setting. Then you can activate the chat visibility, so for me it's only shown when active, but you can also show it all the time if you want to. And here you can also enable all chat, because by default this is turned off, so you will only see what your squad or your own team is writing, but you won't see what the enemy team is writing. If you want to see this and if you want to engage in some friendly chatter, you can turn this, or you have to turn this on here in the settings. You can also select the size of the chat window and the scale if you want to. And then we have the HUD scaling, and here you can actually change the size of all kinds of HUD elements that you can find on your screen. And I've set most of them down by like 10 or 15 points or even 25 here. The only thing that I kept at 100 is confirm log scale, because this is where the kills are shown and also your XP events, and I think this is important, at least for me. Everything else is a bit reduced to make more space for what's actually going on your screen. If you have an ultra wide monitor, you also want to check out horizontal HUD padding, because this allows you to adjust how far off the left and right side the HUD is. Moving on to Crosshair, we have the opacity that you want to keep at 100, of course. Then there is Crosshair color, which is completely personal preference, but I can recommend bright colors, so maybe something like green or yellow or purple or pink or something that stands out from the environment. Then Crosshair thickness can be set to thin, default or thick, so if you have problems seeing your crosshair, set it to thick. If you want a crosshair that looks a little bit different and doesn't stand out that much, go with the thin one. Crosshair projection should be turned on because it can help to reduce motion sickness. And then crosshair impact point icon is how the crosshair of vehicles looks. So if you don't like the circle that is set by default, you can change it to a plus or a cross or completely disable it. Then over at the minimap settings, the first point I would recommend to check is rotate with view, and by default this is turned on, which means the little arrow that represents your soldier always points towards the top of the map, while the map itself rotates around it. And if you would turn the option off, the top of the minimap always points towards the north and your soldier icon is turning inside of it. Both options have their benefit, but I always prefer the map rotating with me, like it is by default, because I found it easier to pin down the location of spotted enemies or find my way around the battlefield. But when turned off, you can also use the map as a compass and turn off the additional one in the middle of the screen to reduce HUD elements. So be sure to experiment with this if you haven't done this yet. You can also reduce the scale of the minimap a little bit, like I went down to 85 for example. And what you can also set is minimap icons scale with view distance, which means when you zoom out the map, the icons are getting smaller, and when you zoom it in, they're getting bigger again. And if this is confusing for you and you want the same size of the icons all the time, you need to set this to off. And then there is another interesting point for the minimap, that is minimap view distance. And this is really useful because Battlefield allows you to seamlessly switch between the different view distances while you are on the map. Because with N on PC, the touchpad on PlayStation, or the select button on Xbox, you can zoom the minimap in 3 predefined stages. And I always found this pretty helpful when you are in a situation where you want to see more or less of your surroundings. And when you set this back to auto, it will automatically adjust depending on whether you are on foot, in a vehicle, or in an aircraft. And these zoom stages can also be defined here in the settings. So for on foot, I've set it to 60, for ground vehicles to 120, and for air vehicles to 240. But again, this is a bit of personal preference, so play around with these values and see what works best for you. Then moving on to the HUD icons, this is probably most interesting if you feel like your screen is too cluttered with all of the icons, your objective icons, friendly soldiers, squad, enemies, and so on. So you can change the icons and the opacity, the scale, everything here in this menu. But what's actually more interesting is the option for aim-based icons opacity on top, because this means that when you aim down sights, symbols that are in the middle of your screen will have lower opacity, so you can look through them easier, and the symbols that are on the edges of the screen have a higher opacity, so you can still see them. And this is really useful, so the objective icons, for example, won't cover any enemy vehicles or soldiers. So the best way is, I think, you play around with them if you feel like that some of these icons cover your screen too much, and you play around with these opacities and see what works for you. Then over at the sound, I have turned down the music completely because I feel like it's really distracting and annoying towards the end of the match. And the rest is at 100 still. Then sound configuration is at stereo for me, and the audio mix at headphones because I'm only playing with headphones. But if you have one of those headphones down here, the Pro G or the Astro EQ, be sure to use these presets. Then audio in the background is turned on for me as well, but I think this is more of a streamer thing because that means that the audio will keep playing when you tap out of the game. Then hit indicator is of course turned on. The in-world radio music as well, but if you don't want to hear any radio from the vehicles or anything, you can turn this off. And then you have a music package that you can select as well, and if you did like the game launch or the first, second, whatever season music a lot, you can select this here from the music package. Then over at voice chat, you can enable or disable voice chat. By default, this is enabled so you can talk to the people in your squad or in your party, but I've set it turned off because that's what I'm always doing. But if you have it enabled and you want to use it, you can set push to talk or open mic here and also set the microphone threshold and everything. But if you frequently use voice chat, I think you should be familiar with this. And then at subtitles, I have turned off all of the subtitles because I don't really need them. And if you want them or if you need them, you can also set the size here. And if you need an outline to see them better, and you can also adjust background opacity. Then I'm going over a few of my controller settings. Most of the settings though that are made here by on foot and vehicles and everything, I will go over in the mouse and keyboard because that's how I mainly play. But when I'm playing with a controller, these are my settings. So the controls are set to custom because I have set steady scope to the aim down sights button, which is LT on the Xbox controller, but more about that in a minute. And the buttons are to alternate, so you have crouch and prone on the right stick and melee and toggle scope on B. Then at the global settings, I have controller vibration turned off. At the on-foot settings, you can see my soldier aim sensitivity, which is 45. Then the aim input curves are all at standard. I have even the aiming left and right acceleration enabled. I usually don't like this, but in 2042 it felt kind of good, so I kept it enabled. And then down the list there is a vertical aim ratio, and for the controller this is set to 45 for me, which means that the left-right movement with the controller, or looking left and right, is a lot faster than looking up and down. So you cannot over-aim up and down with the controller. Over at the vehicles, you can also change the input curve and the acceleration, but I also have this at standard and the acceleration at 50. And at controller tuning, again, the controller vibration is off and both of the standard dead zones are down to 10. The rest is as it is by default for me. Then moving on to mouse and keyboard, I have inverted vertical flight for the aircraft. So this means that the up and down movement is inverted, but you have to try out and see what works best for you here. Mouse raw input is turned on, of course. Then at the on-foot settings, I have my aim sensitivity, which is at 15 with a mouse DPI of 650. Then we have field of view and everything again. And here we have another option that is very interesting and that I think everyone should know how it works or how it kind of works, and that is the uniform soldier aiming. And what it does is that it dynamically adjusts your aim down sight sensitivity depending on the magnification of the optic you use, but without the need of changing one or more of the single zoom aim values down below. So when this option is turned on and you set the coefficient down below to 0, for example, a 6x scope will feel a lot slower than a 2x scope. And with a coefficient of 300, both optics feel almost the same in their sensitivity. So the 6x scope is too fast. But with the right value, it gives you a very consistent experience when aiming down sights, no matter which optic you use. And this has a positive effect on your aim and also on building up muscle memory. However, there is a lot of discussion about what the right value is. Some say it's 122, others say it's 178. I would recommend to keep it as it is and only change it in small steps up or down if you feel like your aim is off, or change one of the separate values down the list if you only want to adjust the sensitivity for one specific magnification. Moving on, I have soldier sprint at click, of course, so everything like it is by default. The only thing I have enabled is sprint to vault over, and I would recommend to turn this on when you feel like you often get stuck on small obstacles or little pebbles or something. Then we have always use traversal sprint, and it could be tempting to turn this on so you always have the fastest sprint possible, but I would not recommend to do this because your sprint to fire speed will be a little bit slower when you come from the traversal sprint compared to the normal sprint. Plus it takes away a little bit of control from your movement, so I would not recommend to turn this on. Then there is all of the zoom options, and what I recommend to do here is to set your aim down sights button to the steady scope button. And this means that your soldier will hold breath in the moment you aim down sights with a sniper rifle, and you won't have to hold or toggle an additional button anymore. And I feel like this is a huge game changer when sniping, and I can really only recommend to use this option. Just click at it and then assign the button you want it to have, and then bind anyway. It just tells you that the button is also bound to another option, which is aiming down sights, of course. Then there is the soldier zoom aim sensitivity, which is at 90 for me, so when I'm aiming down sights, the sensitivity is 10% slower than it is when not aimed down sights. Then we have parachute auto deploy, and I would not recommend to turn this on because it's so unreliable. You can as well have it turned off and just deploy the parachute yourself. What I would recommend to turn on though is auto throw grenades and throwing knives and auto throw crates, because by default in Battlefield 2042 your soldiers get out the grenade or the throwing knives or the crate and is holding it in their hands until you pull the trigger and then you're throwing it. But if you want the old Battlefield feeling where you instantly throw grenades or crates when you press the respective button for them, then you have to turn these options on here. And then if you're used to having your C5 or C4 input inverted like it was in former Battlefield games, you have to turn this option right here on. Then there is again the vertical mouse aim ratio, but here for mouse and keyboard I will keep this at 100 because you want full control over your up, down, left, right movement all the time. And then at edit key bindings, I've actually only changed one thing, and that's at on foot and on the movement. And here I've set crouch to this option here where I can just toggle the left control button to crouch, and I need to hold it when I want to go prone. Then over at vehicles, I have my aim sensitivity at 25. Then the aim sensitivities for gunner and tank also down by 10%. What I would not recommend to turn on, even though it might be tempting, is the helicopter control assist. This will automatically hover your helicopter when there is no input applied. Might be tempting to use this, but it will also kind of up your nose all the time when you're flying the helicopter. So I felt like it's quite annoying when you use this. What I would recommend to turn on though, because I think think this is important is decouple aiming from turning. This affects how the turret of a vehicle turns when you're moving the vehicle, which means with the option disabled, the turret will automatically turn alongside of the vehicle. So when you try to aim at a certain point while the vehicle is turning, you have to work against the movement of the vehicle all the time. And with the option enabled, the turret and vehicle can be turned independently from each other, and that gives you a lot more control over both of them. So be sure to have this option enabled. And for the aircraft, there is a full auto throttle mode, and I would also recommend to keep this turned off, because when you have it enabled, it will apply full thrust all the time. If you're flying jets, you know that you don't want this. You want to have full control over your thrust all the time. And lastly, we have the accessibility settings, and here there's a bit of a mix of settings again that we've seen before already, but what you can set here as well is reduce sprint camera motion. This reduces the movement of the camera when you're running and can have a positive effect on motion sickness if you easily suffer from this. Then the HUD motion should be turned on again, also if you're suffering from motion sickness. And another new option is the concussion effect, and this is completely personal preference, but this defines whether your screen will turn black or white when you are hit by one of the concussion grenades, and by default this is set to bright, which can be a bit annoying and blinding, especially when you're usually playing in a dimly lit room. And if you don't like this, you can set it to dark right here. And at the bottom we have the visual and sound effect for saying straight, because this specialist, when he's low on health and kills an enemy, will instantly start to regenerate health, which has a visual effect that turns your screen a little bit brighter and more colorful, and also comes with a sound effect. And if these are too intense for you, you can turn them down here as well. And that's it for today. That's the ultimate Battlefield 2042 settings guide for 2025. I hope you found this video helpful and you can find the best settings for you and your playstyle as well. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe, and I'm gonna see you in the next one. I'm the Catwoman and you are awesome.